Okay, I'm calling this chess lecture Common Opening Moves. What I mean by this is my lecture series is based upon basically for new players. You're only going to get better by chess by playing chess, solving chess puzzles, and studying games by the masters. And I really haven't covered any what they call annotated games, meaning where I cover a game and make comments of why they're making the various moves. And what I want to do is just show you what are the common, and I'm going to cover the common openings, but just in general I want to show you what are the common first move by white and first move by black that are being played by the masters. Okay, just in general. So let me bring them up. Now, my conclusions are based on my database of 1.2 million games played by masters, and grandmasters. And I want to say, first we're going to cover white's first move. Okay. Now these four moves here that I have here are played or account for 98% of all master level games. Okay. And the white's first move is typically when masters play chess. The first move is e4, d4, knight f3, or c4. What are these moves? I'm going to put them on, draw them on the board. So e4 is here. d4. These two are the most popular. Notice by percentages. Percentage doesn't mean it's the best move. It just means it's the most commonly played move. Okay, so any one of these four moves is good. These two first moves, center pawn. Remember my previous lecture, I said open with a center pawn. The reason I said that is that, like, if I looked at the percentages again, I think it was like 82% of all master level games start by moving one of these two pawns. The other two white moves that are most common is knight f3 and c4. Okay, so these four moves by white, first moves by white, account for 98% of all master level games. Now let's cover black's first move. Okay, and I want to say that there are actually total combinations of 17 possible combinations that I'm going to cover, and these 17 combinations account for like 90% of all master level games, meaning I think for white's first move of e4, I think there's 8 typical responses, and then for d4 I think there's like 2. As we add all these up, there will be a total of 17, and we'll find out that these account for 98% of the moves. So if you actually just memorize 17 combinations, you'll know the beginning of 90% of all master level games. Okay, so first let's just start off by e4. When white moves e4, what are the common responses by black? Well, let me show them to you. Well, here they are. So when white plays e4, the center pawn up 1, okay, it plays this move. Here are the most common moves by black. And like I said, the percentage doesn't mean it's the best move, it's just the most common, and I've just used to rank them this way. So let me draw what they are on the screen. Okay, let me go to the screen and show you what they are. So the first one is c5. Okay. The next one is e5. The next one after that was e6. Let me just draw it in a different color. I've already forgotten. I can't memorize them all. So then there's c6 and d6. So there's c6 and d6. d6. What are the next ones? g6 and d5. So then there's this one, and this one, and then knight f6. So, in response to white's e4, the most common responses are sort of moving. You can sort of see these three pawns here moving up 1 or 2, moving this pawn up one, or moving the knight out. Those are the most common responses. Okay, so when you see this, you can think about sort of that pattern, sort of moving these pawns up, these pawns up one or two, moving this one up one, or moving this knight. Okay, now let's move on to d4. Okay, for d4, it's knight f6 or d5. So let me just back up. So this is d4. So the most common response to this move is knight f6 or d5. So it's this move, which is the most common, or this move. Okay, so you can think about it when you see your opponent play this pawn up one. You can think about, hey, the most common move by the masters is moving the same pawn up two, or moving this knight out. Okay? Now let's move on to the next one. So what about knight f3? Well, the most common responses are knight f6, d5, and c5. So let's show knight f3. What is knight f3? Well, this is knight f3. What were the common responses? They were knight f6. This is knight f6, d5, and c5. If you think about it, when we moved this pawn, we also moved the two most common responses were this pawn and this knight. So actually, if you want to use similar, for memorization, if you move this knight out, you still have these two moves, but you also have the additional move of c5 of moving this pawn up. Okay? So let's go on to the last one. The last one is c4. So what move is c4? Well, this is c4. And what were the common moves? They were knight f6, e5, e6, and c5. So when white makes this move of c4, these were the common moves. Just sort of look at the pattern. Okay, so a little bit different. This opening is probably the most different. In fact, in a recent chess tournament that I played in, I usually prepare chess openings, and I usually always prepare when I'm going to play for white and black, and I always prepare something for e4 and d4, because it's played in most games. In this tournament, I didn't really prepare for c4, and someone played against me. It took me a little bit out of my element. I hadn't studied it, and I actually ended up losing the game, but not because of the opening. Actually, I made a mistake in the endgame. So it's good to learn the common responses to all of them. So let's just maybe try to cover them real quickly again. So for e4, remember, it was just sort of any one of these pawn moves, right? And then this pawn, or this knight, right? And then for d4, it was this knight move, or this move, okay? And for knight f3, it was basically the same moves as the last one, but with the addition of the c pawn. And then for c4, it was knight f6, this pawn up one or two. Oops. Didn't mean to do that with the drawn arrow. Or this pawn. Oops. Or this one. Okay, those were the common moves for c4. Okay, in lesson 7, in the next lesson, I'm actually going to cover the common openings and sort of the reason, maybe sort of the fundamentals behind the different openings, okay? You'll probably see a lot of these common moves that you see. We'll start giving them names and analyzing them a little bit further.